Under the scorching Mediterranean sun lay a narrow coastal strip, framed by jagged mountains and adorned with the majestic fragrance of giant cedar trees. This land, which we now know as Lebanon, was no fertile agricultural paradise. Its soil was rocky, its mountains steep, and arable land was a precious, scarce commodity. For most civilizations, these conditions would have been a curse. But for a determined and innovative people, this very limitation was their destiny. They did not seek their fortune on the arid land, but on the vast blue horizon. They were the Phoenicians, a civilization that rose from the sand and stone to become the unrivaled masters of the sea. Their story begins long before their name was widely known. Around 1500 BCE, while the civilizations around them were busy erecting colossal pyramids in Egypt and building thick-walled cities in Mesopotamia, the Phoenicians turned their gaze to the sea. They were the descendants of the ancient Canaanites, who had long inhabited this coastal region. The scarcity of resources on their land forced them to develop one crucial skill above all others: the art of shipbuilding. They were maritime innovators, using the famously strong and durable Lebanese cedar wood to construct merchant vessels that were not only sturdy, but also fast. These ships were not just tools for transportation. They were the very lifeblood of their existence, allowing them to connect with the outside world and build a civilization that was fundamentally different from any of their neighbors. Initially, their activities were limited to coastal waters, trading with nearby cities. But their skill in sailing continued to grow. They dared to venture into the open sea, using ancient knowledge of astronomy and ocean currents to navigate without the need to keep land in sight. They became the unparalleled sailors of the Mediterranean, a title they earned through sheer courage and expertise. The sea, which for other civilizations was a fearsome barrier, was for the Phoenicians a highway. They were among the first to truly chart the sea itself, not just its coastlines. Their early wealth stemmed from two unique and highly sought-after resources. The first was the abundant cedar wood that grew on their mountains. This timber was in high demand by other civilizations, especially Egypt, which used it to build ships, palaces, and even sarcophagi. This trade relationship with Egypt became the foundation of the Phoenician economy. Their second, far more famous source of wealth was Tyrian purple dye. They discovered the secret to extracting a liquid from a small sea snail, the murex, that produced the most luxurious and rare purple dye in the ancient world. The production process was painstaking, requiring thousands of snails to yield a small amount of the dye. Because of its scarcity and a vibrant color that never faded, this purple became a powerful symbol of wealth and status, coveted by kings and nobles across the entire Mediterranean. The dye became so synonymous with their identity that the Greeks nicknamed them Phoenicians, which literally means the purple people. This Tyrian purple was the most expensive commodity in the Mediterranean, and the high demand for it allowed the Phoenicians to fund even more ambitious and far-reaching trading expeditions. Their cities, such as Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos, were not just centers of production, but bustling hubs of international commerce. In their harbors, a wide array of goods from all over the ancient world were exchanged, from Egyptian papyrus, Cypriot copper, to ivory from Africa. Each of these city-states, while politically independent, shared a common cultural and economic identity, creating a synergy that made them an unstoppable maritime force. They were not an empire in the traditional sense, lacking a vast army to conquer large territories. Their power was not built on conquered land, but on the seas they mastered. The ocean, which for many other civilizations was a terrifying barrier, was for the Phoenicians an open road. They were the bridge that connected civilizations, carrying not just goods but also ideas and technologies from east to west, from north to south. Their audacity to sail into the unknown horizon laid the foundation for the civilization they would build. They proved that from geographical limitations and scarce resources, a highly innovative, wealthy, and unforgettable civilization could emerge, one that would leave behind an enduring legacy that would change the world forever. The wealth flowing from the trade of Tyrian purple and cedar wood provided the capital for the Phoenicians to expand their network beyond their immediate borders. They realized that to sustain and grow their dominance, they had to be more than just sellers of luxury goods. They had to become the indispensable connectors of the entire Mediterranean world. With this vision, they began to establish trading posts and colonies, weaving a web of commerce that would sustain their civilization for centuries. This was not an ambitious military expansion, but a smart and pragmatic economic strategy. Their ships, loaded with valuable goods rather than soldiers, sailed west towards the uncharted frontiers of the known world. They established trading posts in strategic locations that became crucial hubs in their sea lanes. These bases provided safe harbors to dock, resupply, and interact with the local populations. This was how they came to dominate trade routes without ever having to conquer other kingdoms. Their expansion began on the island of Cyprus, a land rich in copper, the primary raw material for making bronze, the most important metal of the Bronze Age. From there, they moved further north to the islands of Greece and west, braving dangerous straits and unmapped seas. Their courage took them all the way to the coasts of modern Spain, where they founded Gadir, now Cadiz, to exploit the rich silver and tin mines there. The silver and tin from Spain were vital commodities that made them even wealthier and more powerful. But the centerpiece of their expansion was in North Africa. There, around 814 BCE, the legendary Queen Dido, Elissa, is said to have founded their most magnificent colony. Queen Dido, fleeing from her power-hungry brother in Tyre, arrived in North Africa. She made a deal with the local chief to purchase as much land as she could cover with a single ox hide. With remarkable ingenuity, Queen Dido cut the ox hide into incredibly thin, long strips, which she then used to encircle a large strategic hill. Upon this hill, she founded Carthage, which means new city. This city, which we know today as Carthage, would grow into the most formidable maritime power and become the true heir to the Phoenician civilization. Their genius wasn't just in selling goods, it was in trading knowledge. As they interacted with other civilizations like the Greeks, Egyptians, and Mesopotamians, they absorbed ideas, technologies, and cultures. They were the bridges that connected the ancient world, carrying ideas and goods from east to west and back again. They became intermediaries who not only sold luxury items but also spread concepts, innovations, and, most importantly, a revolutionary system of writing. With their vast network, they created a thalassocracy, or a sea empire. They did not hold power over vast swathes of land as Egypt or Assyria did, but they controlled the seas and the trade routes that were the lifeblood of the entire Mediterranean. Every civilization, from the Greeks to the Etruscans, depended on Phoenician ships for precious goods and vital commodities. All the wealth and power they enjoyed, from the silver-rich lands of Spain to the fertile grounds of Egypt, originated from small ships and the courage of sailors who dared to sail into the uncharted horizon. The power of the Phoenicians was not just in their ships and their wealth, but in an intellectual legacy that would fundamentally alter the course of human history. Amidst the bustle of their commerce, with ships constantly arriving at the crowded harbors of Tyre and Sidon, Phoenician merchants faced a simple but critical problem: how to record business transactions quickly and efficiently. Egyptian hieroglyphs, with their hundreds of intricate symbols, and Mesopotamian cuneiform, which required special skills to inscribe on clay tablets, were too slow, too complex, and could only be mastered by a select few professional scribes. From this practical need, their greatest innovation was born. Around 1200 BCE, the Phoenician merchants cleverly simplified these cumbersome writing systems into a revolutionary phonetic alphabet. They discarded the idea that every word or concept needed a unique symbol. Instead, they focused on what mattered most: sound. With just 22 symbols representing consonant sounds, they created a tool that was far simpler and easier to learn than any other writing system in the ancient world. This alphabet allowed merchants to rapidly record inventory, contracts, and correspondence, opening the door to literacy for anyone with a desire to learn. The Phoenician alphabet was a democratic revolution in communication. The alphabet they created was no accident. It was the result of their constant interaction with other civilizations. They drew inspiration from various sources, refined them, and perfected them into a highly efficient system. This alphabet spread across the Mediterranean through their unstoppable trade network. As Greek merchants interacted with the Phoenicians, they were amazed by the system's efficiency. They adopted and adapted the alphabet, adding vowels to create the Greek alphabet. This Greek alphabet, in turn, became the basis for the Etruscan alphabet, and eventually the Latin alphabet, which is the foundation for almost every major language we use in the Western world today. The very letters you are using to read and write right now are a direct descendant of an innovation created by determined merchants on the ancient coast of Lebanon. Beyond the alphabet, the Phoenicians were also unmatched navigators and cartographers. Their daring on the open sea far surpassed that of other civilizations. They didn't just sail along the coastline, they were brave enough to venture across the vast open ocean. They were among the first known to systematically use the North Star for nighttime navigation, a technique that gave them a tremendous advantage and allowed them to sail far north and south without losing their way. Their knowledge of astronomy and ocean currents gave them incredible precision, transforming their merchant ships into sophisticated tools of exploration. Legend even has it that Phoenician sailors under the patronage of the Egyptian pharaoh Necho II managed to circumnavigate the entire continent of Africa, a feat considered impossible by other civilizations for centuries. While the historical accuracy of this tale is still debated by historians, it serves as a powerful testament to their reputation as the most courageous and skilled sailors of the ancient world. If true, it was one of the greatest achievements in the history of exploration, millennia before modern European explorers. Their expertise was also reflected in their shipbuilding technology. In addition to using strong cedar wood, they perfected ship design, especially for their warships. They built biremes and triremes, warships with 2 or 3 tiers of oars that could move with incredible speed and agility. The most innovative part of these ships was the reinforced prow, known as the ram, which was used to crash into and sink enemy vessels, a highly effective tactic in naval battles. This technology was later adopted by the Greek and Roman navies, who would eventually come to dominate the Mediterranean. From a simple need to keep records, the Phoenicians gave the world a tool that enabled the mass spread of knowledge. From their determination to explore the oceans, they mapped the world and paved the way for future explorers. They proved that a civilization's greatest legacy isn't always towering stone monuments, but rather the ideas that change the way humanity communicates, travels, and understands the world. As time passed, the original Phoenician mother cities, such as Tyre, began to lose their dominance due to invasions from powerful land-based empires like the Assyrians, Babylonians, and Persians. Their power waned in the eastern Mediterranean. However, the seeds they had planted in foreign lands had grown into a mighty tree. Their colony in North Africa, Carthage, founded by the legendary Queen Dido, had rapidly expanded into a wealthy, ambitious city-state, far more powerful than its mother city. Carthage was no longer just a trading post. It was the true heir to the Phoenician maritime legacy and a formidable new center of civilization. Unlike the isolated and vulnerable Phoenician cities in the east, Carthage was built in a highly strategic location on the North African coast, allowing it to control the vital shipping lanes between the eastern and western Mediterranean. With this power, Carthage took over the Phoenician trade network, expanding it into new territories. They came to dominate the trade routes in Spain, which was incredibly rich in mines of silver, copper, and tin. The immeasurable wealth from these mines flowed into Carthage, allowing them to build an immensely prosperous state. Carthage's wealth didn't just come from trade. They also possessed incredibly fertile agricultural lands, which enabled them to produce vast quantities of grain, wine, and olives. This gave them an economic stability that the original, geographically limited Phoenician city-states never had. With this combined wealth from both commerce and agriculture, they built a massive naval fleet, one more powerful than all other Mediterranean navies combined. Their shipyards were capable of producing warships with a speed and scale never before seen. This navy wasn't just for protecting their trade routes. It was a tool to project Carthaginian power into every corner of the known world. However, Carthage was more than just an economic powerhouse. They developed a formidable military that, while heavily reliant on mercenary soldiers from various African tribes, was highly effective under the command of their brilliant generals. They recruited infantry from Libya, cavalry from Numidia, and Celtic infantry from Spain, but the most iconic element of their military was their war elephants, which became a symbol of their power and a source of terror on the battlefield. These elephants, trained and imported from North Africa, were a devastating force that every land-based enemy feared. At the height of its power, Carthage was a magnificent city with strong walls, a massive harbor, and a population estimated to be in the hundreds of thousands. Its government was an oligarchy, where power was held by a few wealthy merchant families. Nevertheless, there were also democratic elements that allowed citizens to have a voice, demonstrating that they were a politically sophisticated civilization. Carthage, as the true successor of the Phoenician civilization, believed that Mediterranean dominance was their right. They controlled strategic islands and dominated trade from Gibraltar to the coast of North Africa. But their power would not last forever. Across the sea on the Italian peninsula, a new and ambitious power was rising from a small city on 7 hills. They called themselves the Romans, and their ambition to become the dominant force in the Mediterranean would soon clash with Carthaginian power in the most brutal and defining conflict of the ancient world. This is where the story reaches its boiling point. On one side stood Carthage, the wealthy heir of the Phoenician maritime legacy, an empire controlled by merchants and backed by an unparalleled fleet. On the other stood the Roman Republic, a rising land power driven by political ambition, ruthless military discipline, and a desire to dominate the entire Mediterranean. These two forces, separated by the narrow Strait of Sicily, finally collided in a series of conflicts known as the Punic Wars. This was not just a fight for territory. It was a life or death struggle to determine who would rule the ancient world. The First Punic War, 264 to 241 BCE, was a battle for control of Sicily, a strategic island that was the key to the Western Mediterranean. This was at its heart a clash between the newly formed Roman navy and Carthage's veteran superior fleet. While Carthage initially held the advantage, Roman tenacity in building their own fleet, even by reverse engineering a grounded Carthaginian ship, eventually turned the tide. Rome's victory at sea forced Carthage to surrender Sicily and pay a massive indemnity, a devastating blow to their pride. But the tension did not subside. The climax of this story is etched in the Second Punic War, 218-201 BCE, the conflict that defined a general whose name would be remembered forever, Hannibal Barca. Hannibal, a brilliant Carthaginian general with a burning hatred for Rome, launched an attack that no one thought possible. He marched from Spain, crossed the Pyrenees Mountains, and most shockingly, traversed the snow-covered Alps with a massive army of tens of thousands of soldiers and his feared war elephants. Hannibal launched a surprise attack from the north, a move completely unexpected by the Romans. On Italian soil, he delivered a series of stunning military victories. He defeated a Roman army at Trebia, and then at Lake Trasimene through a brilliant ambush. The pinnacle of his genius came at the Battle of Cannae in 216 BCE, where he used a masterful double envelopment tactic to annihilate a much larger Roman force. These victories shocked the entire ancient world and brought Rome to the brink of collapse. For a time, it seemed the Phoenician Empire through Carthage would once again dominate the world. Hannibal was at the peak of his power, a symbol of an unstoppable military force. Yet beneath these glorious victories, the seeds of destruction had already been sown. Despite Hannibal's immense military might, he was never able to capture the city of Rome itself. He lacked sufficient siege equipment, and more importantly, he could never completely sever Rome's supply lines. Rome, with its legendary persistence, refused to surrender. They adopted a war of attrition, avoiding direct battle with Hannibal, and instead began to press Carthage and other territories, particularly in Spain. With this strategy, they managed to divert Hannibal's focus and slowly drain Carthage's resources. While Hannibal was winning battles on Italian soil, Rome, with its legendary tenacity, refused to surrender. They understood they couldn't beat him in a direct open conflict, so they adopted a different strategy. A brilliant young Roman general named Publius Cornelius Scipio, later known as Scipio Africanus, realized that the key to defeating Hannibal was not in Italy, but in his own backyard. Scipio made the bold move to invade North Africa, taking the fight directly to Carthage. This audacious strategy forced the Carthaginians to recall Hannibal from Italy to defend his homeland. In 202 BCE, the two greatest generals of the ancient world finally met on the battlefield of Zama, just outside Carthage. It was the final confrontation that would decide the fate of the Mediterranean. Hannibal, whose army was exhausted and demoralized after years of war and far from home, did not have the same advantages he had in Italy. Scipio, who had studied Hannibal's tactics, masterfully countered his famous war elephants and exploited a key weakness in his cavalry. The Battle of Zama was a decisive victory for Rome, and this defeat broke Carthage's military power forever. They were forced to sign a devastating peace treaty, surrendering their entire naval fleet, giving up all their territories in Spain, and paying an immense sum of money to Rome. The Second Punic War had ended, and Rome was now the undisputed master of the Mediterranean. But for a powerful Roman senator named Cato the Elder, the destruction of Carthage wasn't complete. He was convinced that as long as Carthage existed, Rome would never be truly safe. With every speech he gave in the Senate, he would conclude with the now famous demand, Carthago delenda est, Carthage must be destroyed. Ultimately, Cato's fear and Roman paranoia became reality. In 149 BCE, the Third Punic War began. This was not a war between equals, but a brutal 3-year siege of a defenseless city. The Roman army laid siege to Carthage, and after a prolonged and savage struggle, they broke through the city's walls. They razed the city to the ground, selling its remaining inhabitants into slavery. Legend says that the Romans even sowed salt into the soil of Carthage, so that nothing could ever grow there again. Whether true or not, the story perfectly captures the brutal finality of Carthage's end. The city was erased from the face of the earth, and with its fall, the Phoenician legacy as an independent power vanished forever. The once great maritime empire that had dominated the seas was gone, a casualty of a war it could not win against a rising titan of the land. The story of the Phoenician Empire and its greatest heir, Carthage, ends in total annihilation. Their cities were destroyed, their ships burned, and their wealth plundered. The Phoenicians, the ingenious sea lords, had finally succumbed to the brutal, unyielding force of a land-based empire. In the eyes of their enemies, especially the Romans, they were just cunning and dangerous merchants, a threat that had to be utterly extinguished. But their story does not truly end there. While their physical empire was erased from the map, their legacy lived on, etched into the very fabric of our civilization to this day. Their greatest inheritance was not made of gold or silver, but of an idea, the alphabet they created. This simple, revolutionary system, which they shared with the world, was adopted by the Greeks, then the Romans, and became the foundation for the Latin alphabet we use across the Western world. Without the simple innovation of these Phoenician merchants, who needed a faster way to keep track of their goods, mass literacy might never have spread, and the course of modern civilization would have been profoundly different. They also bequeathed an unparalleled maritime knowledge. Greek and Roman sailors learned much from Phoenician navigation skills and ship designs. The trade network they forged became the economic foundation for the ancient Mediterranean, later seized and expanded upon by the Romans. The cities they founded, from Gadir in Spain to Carthage in North Africa, became centers of civilization that thrived for centuries, even under new masters. Ultimately, the Phoenician Empire is a story of adaptability and innovation. They were a people who sought not land to conquer, but seas to explore. They used ingenuity, not brute force, to dominate their world. Yet their story is also a stark reminder that even the most clever and prosperous of civilizations are not immune to the cruelties of war and the hubris of power. Their tale is a forgotten legend. We know so much about Egypt, Greece, and Rome because they left behind magnificent stone monuments that have endured for millennia. But the Phoenicians left behind a legacy that is far more powerful. An invisible, intangible inheritance that is nonetheless inseparable from the way we communicate and understand the world. They were merchants who created a civilization, sailors who opened up the world, and a people whose destruction serves as a timeless lesson for us all. So, the next time you write or read these letters, remember those courageous merchants from the coast of ancient Lebanon, who sailed into the great unknown and left a legacy that shapes our modern world. A story not carved in stone, but alive in every word we speak. Do you want to dive deeper into more incredible stories like this? From forgotten civilizations to the epic battles that changed the fate of the world. Subscribe to continue the journey.